Everybody, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the 1974 science fiction film Phase 4, which you can see the poster right there. And you can see this movie is about ants are the main star of this movie. And I should say a little bit about the director of this film a little bit. This was directed by Saul Bass, who was mainly known today for the titles, as he designed title sequences for films, opening titles. Did a lot of work for Alfred Hitchcock movies like Vertigo and North by Northwest. He later worked on some Martin Scorsese movies, but worked a lot through the 50s up into the 90s, and also designed a lot of corporate logos, a lot of the real famous corporate logos you're familiar with. There's a chance Saul Bass designed it. So he's a really important figure, really, in the history of cinema for doing that. Unfortunately, a lot of films today don't have the big opening title sequences like you would get, really up until, I guess that stopped 15 years ago or so, but we occasionally will still get one. But Phase 4 was the only movie that Bass directed, his one and only film. And it's an interesting one. So, as I said, this movie is about ants. And basically the story is we're with some scientists in the Arizona desert. Although it was filmed in Kenya, Africa. In Kenya, the country in Africa, interestingly enough. But we're at this geodesic dome in the desert where scientists are investigating some strange activity among the ants in the area. Like, they've noticed that a lot of the predators of ants have disappeared, that there's a big biological imbalance around the area. And we also learned at the beginning that something in space, something strange happened in space as well. So there's I guess that sci-fi element to the story as well. But the two scientists are played by Michael Murphy, who I know from, he was in a lot of Robert Altman movies, and Nigel Davenport plays the older scientist, who is a British actor and is in many British films. So later on, they're joined by Lynn Frederick, a young woman whose family was killed by the ants, and she comes into the film as well about midway through. So they're investigating the behavior of ants, and they're beginning to see, like, it's as if ants are gaining intelligence, and they are taking over the area in terms of biology. And eventually, the scientists realize that they are being targeted by the ants as well, that the ants have developed intelligence where they can work more efficiently than before, almost to the point where they can begin to communicate with the scientists and through their signals that they send, and they're able to decipher it. So this is a really cerebral science fiction movie where it takes something implausible and tries to make it as scientifically accurate as possible as far as how this would happen. And we can see the ants gaining the upper hand on the scientist, and they quickly realize they're in deep trouble. They've also apparently developed lethal toxins where if an ant bites a human, where the Nigel Hawthorne character is bitten, and he becomes really sick and in really bad shape after being bitten by the ants. But they're attacking people, they're attacking ecosystems, and that's where it's going. It's pointed out in the film that ant society, if insect society, if you want to call it that, in some ways is even more efficient than human society, because, as one of the characters says in the film, that the ants are altruistic. Individuality means nothing with ants. Like, they work as one social cohesive unit, and if you can, it's easy to kill one ant, but if you have thousands, millions upon millions of ants working together, we're in big trouble, especially if they develop super intelligence as they appear to be doing in this film. So it's a really the tone is really has this ominous tone throughout. The photography is very impressive, where it's not fake ants; it's real ants on that were filmed by camera people, and just really we see ants, like how they live and how they attack other things, and just how efficient they are. So the photography is really interesting in the film. And Saul Bass, it's really directed well. Like there's even one shot that kind of reminiscent of David Lynch a little bit would later do, where the camera kind of goes lower into the ground, and we can see the how infested the ground is with ants. Like Blue Velvet would do that. So in terms of just the way Bass framed the photography and the shots in the film is really impressive. The music score is eerie as well. There's a psychedelic tone, especially when we're with the ants, and there is just this sign of transcendence happening in the story, which we eventually get to. Also, if you're familiar with the TV show In Search Of, the I guess paranormal show hosted by Leonard Nimoy, and this movie has a lot of the stylings of that TV show and things like that. And just how, as the ants begin to infiltrate their system, and just the framing of ants getting into electrical units and infiltrating all the technology, and it's really eerie, like really odd juxtapositions of things that we see throughout the film as well. About midway through, the scientists realize that the ants are getting very powerful, and the Nigel Hawthorne scientist says, well, we need to make a show of force to show them how powerful we are, and maybe they'll back off. And of course that backfires, and that made me think of like Cold War science, and how that very militaristic way of thinking that got into the scientific community at the time. But this idea of needing to make a show of force, and let's see what the other side does. So there is this, I think, interesting Cold War theme going throughout the film that was interesting. And to compare it with Them, which I've talked about earlier, the ant invasion film of the 50s, and these films tell you a lot about their eras, where the film in the 50s, the tone is more optimistic. There's a very kind of can-do attitude. Science in that film is quite confident it can solve the problem. And in Phase 4, we see it's more about the overconfidence of science, and just the general sense of progress hitting a brick wall that we get into this film, and the idea that human ingenuity is very powerless when put in the face of some of the bigger powers of nature. So this film does a really good job of that 70s melancholy tone that we have throughout the film. Really works too. There's cool ideas where they use math to communicate with the ants, and things like that too. The film really works as far as making this situation really plausible. And there's even kind of a Vietnam, I think, allegory, where the narration at the end says, where it's apparent that the ants are going to be taking over, and says, like, first they'll take the countryside, and then they'll go into the cities. So that's kind of like the strategy during the Vietnam War. So there's even that kind of war analogy that's one could read into in this film. So it's just a great 70s science fiction film. It's very brief. It runs about 80 minutes, so it's a short film. It's very effective. Yeah, and everything from the music, the sound, and the photography. It really holds up well as a very unique take on the creature. Well, like creature feature, I guess you'd call it, but that kind of demeans this one because the tone of it is so elevated compared to other movies of its type at the time. So anyway, yeah, that's Phase 4. Just a cool 70s movie, and definitely I would recommend. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.